Okay, it is 6 p.m. June 16th of 2026. We are at Historical City Hall in the council chambers in a special session on a corrected agenda. And we'll follow the agenda as outlined. We'll begin with item number 1. That is review and action on a resolution regarding the proposed tax rate and setting the truth in taxation public hearing date for August 11th, 2026. So, that is Anna.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to give a timeline on why we're here. We adopted the tentative budget on May 12th, the interim budget on June 9th, which was last week. The state requires us to set a proposed tax rate by June 22nd, and that is next Monday, which is prior to our next council meeting. So that's why we're in a special session. This is a proposed rate. It is programmed in our budget. The tax rate that is proposed tonight will go out to the residents and their tax notice sent by the county. So that goes out to the public based on the rate we propose tonight. It is not set and adopted until August 11th when we have our public hearing. And so we can make changes as needed, but we cannot go over the 9% proposed. We can go under that 9%. However, this 9% is to fund the new fire station, as you know. We've done everything we can to tighten the budget to be able to fund this $1.5 million expense that is a new staffing for this fire station. So we feel like this is a reasonable request to do $660,000 to fill this gap to fund this fire station. It equates to about $33 per resident based on the average home value, which is about $275 a month on their tax bill. It's about 1.4% of their total tax bill as they have it this year. So that just sets a timeline and the reason for doing so. And so if you have any questions as far as how that was calculated or any questions on the purpose of it, I'm happy to answer that. Yes, I'd be happy to. So attached to, on the proposed resolution, it has the tax rate in total. Let me pull that up. So the portion of the tax rate that we are proposing is the general tax rate. The certified tax rate is 0.001395. That is what the state came back with as our certified rate. To increase it 9% or $660,000, the proposed rate would be 0.001516, which again would generate the amount to fill that gap in the budget of $660,000.
All right. Questions?
So the process that we would go through is we are saying this is the rate we're adopting. We have the truth in taxation on August 11th. And then we vote to
Adopt the rate. Yes.
I'm just going to come in clean on the record. I'm having a really hard time with the tax increase. I know you've done everything you can. I'm just not going to pull any surprises on anyone. I'm really struggling with everything else that's coming down with adopting the tax rate. So I just want to, don't want anyone to be surprised. That's where I am right now. I know we've got to do it. I know it's just nothing but a headache for you and the administration. I totally get that. But I really struggle with that and finding $660,000 in addition to the $900,000 we've already found to fund the station. I want to fund the station. I'm 100% behind it, but something else has got to give. I said this when we were going through the other stuff before. There's too much going on. I'm not seeing salaries matching what's happening with inflation and all the different things going on there. I think I don't know. So, not saying I won't have a change of heart, but I have a really difficult time with it right now, and I don't think I just don't know how I'm gonna do it. So, just so you all know.
Yeah, I sent all of y'all emails, and I feel very much the same way. It would be a very, very big change of situation before I'd vote to increase taxes by 1 cent. And David, I met with you one-on-one too to talk about this. It's just between inflation, between water rates going up, between what the school district did last year with property tax increases, everybody's raising taxes. Our impact fees are going to go up 30% after we discussed a couple weeks ago from 12 to 16,000. And I mean, residents can only take so much. They can only take so much. They can't be going up. We saw that. That's why one of the articles I sent you is that inflation is going up faster than wages are increasing. And so people are, even if they got a pay increase, they have less money this year than they did last year. And so for us to just pile on with another tax increase is, as I said, it would take almost an act of God at this point for me to support a tax increase. I'm more than happy for us to go through the truth and taxation process. But as I said, I sent over an email to all of you. I have lots of ideas on how we can do it. I think wage increases is probably the biggest one, that we just have to look across the board on smaller wage increases this year. And so, anyway, that's my thought. So I'm more than happy to make a motion and approve this proposed tax rate, but very, very unlikely I'm going to support it.
So can I just clarify one point? This is based on the new tax law. This is earmarked specifically for fire salaries. Should it not be approved as proposed, we cannot use this earmarked money of $660,000. So staffing for the fire station would not be fully staffed. So it's set aside. So as we adopt the interim budget next week, we have to adopt that by June 30th. That line item of $660,000 is set apart. Any other money that we budgeted will be passed as unless you have changes on the interim budget.
Well, I guess just for clarification, so if we took general fund expenditures, like instead of giving $100,000 to the administrative staff, or instead of hiring a new accountant or something like that, if we decide not to do that, we couldn't reallocate that money to these firefighters?
We would have to budget amend.
Okay. Well, I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. I 100% support, and I've said this many, many times, that we need firefighters stationed down there. I think that the Tesla or whatever caught on fire last week, or whatever that was, demonstrates, and we had someone who came here and said, hey, she was worried about getting her family out of that side. I think that that's our number one priority, is safety in the city. So we have to figure that out. And as I said, David, we talked about this. I'm willing to cut a lot of things to make sure that we have both firefighters and not a property tax increase. As I said, the residents are already getting hammered, and so we can't be another hammer on top of them. So anyway, as I said, I'm more than happy to make a motion to approve this.
Let's hear if anybody else wants to comment. Of course, do what we want, but.
I'll just share my thoughts. I appreciate Tim's done a lot of work on this, and my initial instinct is, I wish there's a way, I hope there's a way we can come up with that. I obviously haven't done the studies that you have, and I appreciate you taking the time to do that. One of the thoughts, though, is that I'm concerned with is everything that I've seen is tied to not everything, but a significant percentage of the cuts that we're talking about, or at least if I read what you shared correctly, they would be on wage increases. And we just talked, the argument for not doing it is that wage increases are not keeping up with inflation, and then we tell our own staff that we're not going to increase your wages to keep up with inflation. And so I'm struggling with that conversation of like, you know.
Well, I can answer that really, really quickly. Sorry, I'll turn the mic on. When I sent over to y'all, I said, I'm going to have you talk with it. We can save $660,000 and give 4% increases, which is more than inflation, which is more than what the private sector is getting. A lot of these departments are getting 10% increases year over year. And I can say specifically, so the library is a perfect example. Over the past 2 years, they have not added one FTE, and their wages have gone up like 22%. And so that's one specific example. And I can go, and I sent that in there.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
So yes, I'm saying that
So
we
you're
go
still
4%.
keeping it at-
Yeah,
at
keep
an
it at
increase
4%. Yeah, keep it at 4%, which is higher than inflation, because inflation was like 3.9%. So we do 4%, which at least matches inflation. If we just get from like 10% to 4%, there are levers we can pull that get to 660.
I think for me it would be important to understand why those have increased before I just blatantly say only 4%. I actually don't, I'm on the library board and I'm not quite sure why they have increased, other than I know that they're abysmally low, like really low, and that might be why we've been trying to bring them up to more of a standard wage.
I mean, I could speak to that unless
Go
Dave
ahead.
has some comments.
Yeah.
We do benchmark against other cities, so it's not general CPI, it's being competitive with our surrounding cities in the government sector. David could speak more on that as far
Yeah.
as how that compares, but for example, library was extremely low, it was below the benchmark, and so we brought them up, and that's why that increased probably more than CPI, because they were below that benchmark at a couple of years ago, and so they had a higher than CPI or normal increase in that 1 year, and so brought them up probably higher than we would expect to see, but.
And what's difficult there is, as we benchmark, there are sometimes certain departments or certain positions in the city that when we benchmark, it is higher than the CPI. And I know last year library was that way as we benchmarked the library salaries. We've gone through that with various positions in the city through the years. Engineering went through that, and there, as we benchmarked engineering team, they were higher than the CPI substantially, and it was hard for us to even get engineers there for a while. Building inspectors, same thing. There are times when those positions, as we evaluate them, there's a big shift, and we try to stay competitive so that we can retain our good employees. And so, library, I mean, Councilmember, you saw that in the budget increases, but that's exactly what had happened, so.
And I said, I'm not saying that specifically needs to be the lever we pull. As I said, I send this over, there are multiple departments, and I get that we need to benchmark and everything, but we, as the 5 members, have our names attached to this budget, and sometimes we have to make tough decisions. And I'll share something personal. Maybe not everybody knows this. I was laid off this year. It sucks. Sometimes things have to give. It sucks a lot. It sucks to be unemployed, but sometimes we have to make tough decisions. Like my company, they made a tough decision. They laid off 10% of the company, and I was one of those 30 people. And sometimes we have to make tough decisions, and the general fund expenditure budget increased by 17% this year. We can have it increase 15%, which is still a lot. Most of that is related to wages, and still save $660,000. I sent over a bunch of things. I'm not saying which lever, I'm just saying that there are lots of levers to pull, and I understand that we want to benchmark, we want to keep good employees, but we're talking about residents here who are not only not getting benchmarked, they're not meeting inflation, and they're getting laid off. And so that's the things we need to think about. That the private sector is very different from the public sector, and that people are getting laid off, or they're not getting wages, not even benchmarking, not meeting inflation. And so we, as the 5 people that have our names attached to this budget forever, need to decide what are the hard decisions that we make. And I feel very, very strongly that there are those tough decisions that we can make. As I send them all over so we can talk about them, but that allow for us to get firefighters that we need and not have to do a tax increase. So
I just venture in on this as well. Mine is a philosophical approach to this. Mine's a philosophical approach to this because we just, and we talked about this 2 months ago, and I said the same thing. We just keep going back to the well. Nothing changes, and we just go back to the well. Now, my situation isn't exactly like Tim's, but I had the rug pulled out from me last year at this exact time, and I was unemployed. And after owning a business for 27 years. And so, yeah, there were some big changes that I had to look at and take into consideration and do that. And
I know they're not just simple, but what if we had no choice? What if we had no choice? We had to make changes. And maybe now, because TSSD pops up, we have to have a tax increase, the water rate's going up, the secondary water rate's going up. Everywhere we turn, it's going up. And so if our option to go and to be able to help our city and take care of these things is to raise taxes, and then next year, because the cost of living will go up next year, we'll have to do that, what gives? What's going to go away that's going to prevent us from continually going back to the well until, we can't do it. And I know it's not simple. I'm not saying for a second, Anna, I wouldn't stand in your spot for all the money in the world. But I just think of things like, with things like public safety, this can't be good. But these are going to be just terribly unpopular. But we have an incredible fleet, a great-looking fleet of vehicles. And just because when Brad and I worked for the city, I was driving a truck that was no less than 12 years old. It's not appealing, it's not nice, there wasn't air conditioning, but we got the job done and we did that. We couldn't take trucks home. We couldn't drive to opposing cities and take a truck home and have the city pay for gas. I realize those are benefits now. But what's going to give? How do we continue to go back? And next year, because something will come up next year, in addition to our water rates going up, and by the way, prepare for that, because next year is going to happen as well after that. Oh, and the 3 years, following that. We have to be able to do something different, and I'm not a brainiac with the accounting and to go through that. I understand the value of good employees. I'm not suggesting slash those salaries, but maybe it is in other things. Maybe it is in things that become luxuries, and there's things that I'm very close to that are big luxuries that maybe we have to step back from, in terms of what the city subsidizes is what I mean. But it's just we just can't keep going back to that well and say, well, the answer is to increase the taxes. That's where I have the problem, is that, especially when there's so much right now. So.
I would like to provide a little bit of a counterpoint, my thoughts. Essentially, we're increasing service dramatically in a way that you wouldn't do with the analogy of when you lose your job. You're not going to lose your job and be like, I'm going to build this new house, even though I've lost my job. This isn't really a side-by-side comparison to that in my mind, because if we're choosing to increase service so dramatically with an entirely new fire station that we have built and will now be trying to staff, and yet we've able to put almost all of it, except for this $660,000, into the current budget. We've been able to absorb it into the current things we've already done, which to me was very surprising that we could get it that low. I was, how do you increase service in a decreasing taxable way, because we don't get an inflationary increase in our property taxes, and yet we're still able to get those services. And I've looked, how are we even funding all those? Where is our revenue coming from? We have our sales tax is flat, property tax is only the new growth. It's a miracle to me that we're able to get, there's more.
Just to reiterate that point, to fully fund a new fire station just for staffing with just property tax, it would have been $70 a year per resident. We're down to $33 a year. And so we feel like this is a cut down from what we would ask to fully fund that new service.
And I think that, to me, we're asking the staff and we're asking as a budget to increase service, and then at the same time say, oh, well, just do away with something else. What are we going to do away with then that we're going to decrease in order to get this increase of service? You can't have it both ways.
We're increasing our service for the fire station. What else is changing inside the city besides the fire station?
Inflation. Those are the two metrics I see. You get inflation and a whole new fire station that we have to absorb on our current budget without a tax increase.
You know, I'm going to add, I think it's inflation over a couple of years that we have absorbed inflation. You know, that we don't, there's inflationary things in the utilities. Yeah, I get it, but as far as the budget, the general fund, this would be the second time since I've been in office that we've done this. It's not, it was 4 or 5 years ago, general terms, now in consideration of this year. So once the inflation mounted up does have a break point.
To clarify, Mayor, the last time we did it was 4 years ago, and CPI within that time frame, 4 years, has been about 18%, and we're asking for 9%. So again, we're cutting back, just not even keeping it with inflation, so.
That's why when I hear we got to do without, I feel like we are doing that. It actually drives me crazy when people that have not been in the budget say, well, you don't know how to budget because you don't know how to do without. Yeah, come try cutting everything we've already cut and see where else. Do you want to just not have a library at all? Do you not want to have, at some point you have to make those decisions. What is it? I don't think we should do it on wages. That's only going to cause more problems in the long run.
So I want to make a couple points. Sorry, Stacey, I completely agree with a lot of what you said. I think there's a couple more, and this is maybe getting to philosophical too. I think it's important that the $33 that residents are going to be paying is a little bit inaccurate, and I say a lot inaccurate. So the businesses will also pay property taxes, right? That gets funneled down to people eventually. Businesses don't pay taxes. People pay taxes. So whether it's the business owners, the employees, or the residents with increased cost of goods, eventually that will trickle down to people, not some corporation. So that's good. It's actually going to be closer to like $60 per person per year. The other thing we have to think about, and I brought this up to you, David, is that we, in our newsletter, said just don't go to JCW's for a meal. That's 2 people, right? Well, then we have sales tax revenue that decreases accordingly, and it's not equal because it's only like 7%. But there will be a hit on sales tax, and also we have to think about small businesses. So if we tell residents to not go to JCW's or not to go to Donut Run or something like that, it says that in the June newsletter. It says if you go to JCW's, that's $30 for 2 people. And that's where I got a little bit frustrated. So this is where I get frustrated. If we tell residents to not go shopping, for instance, or it's the equivalent of a $30 meal, the problem is that if they don't go to Walmart, if we take that $300,000 out of Walmart, that's an FTE. So that's someone that doesn't get hired. And that's what we have to think about the system. It's not just like, oh, just $30 a year out of residents' pocket. Over collectively, that's $300,000 that the city is taking and that residents aren't spending, so we lose on sales tax revenue. Amazon doesn't hire people, Walmart doesn't hire people. I have a small business in Provo. If I didn't get $100,000 of revenue, that would probably put me out of business. And so that's what we have to think about, is that there are these second and third order effects when we tell residents to pay the city versus spending it or something like that. And so are we okay with potentially a small business going out of business? Are we okay with an American Fork resident not getting hired, or 2 residents not getting hired as warehouse distribution people at the Amazon fulfillment center? There are all these things we have to consider, because if we are taking that money, that $600,000, and increased property tax, then that is money that residents aren't spending necessarily, or they just have less money in their bank account. And that has these trickle effects, and so it all is trickling down. They have reduced savings. As I said, people don't get hired. Maybe someone doesn't start a business because of that. Maybe a small business goes out of business. It's just, we have to think about this as a system. It's not just, oh, $30 out of one family's household. As I said, it's more than that, because businesses don't pay taxes, but there will be other consequences. And we're already struggling where businesses are going out of business here in the city. That's why we started this economic forum thing with Clark and Ryan on it. We're having an issue with businesses, and we're already having sales tax that's flat. So sure, we can take property tax, but then less sales tax gets collected. And as I said, there's a bunch of other things. So that's why I get really, really frustrated. That's why I look at expenditures always, and that's why I will always harp on expenditures. Because yes, we might not be increasing services a lot, but our general fund expenditure bucket increased by 17% this year. That is a ton. That is way more than growth, and that is way more than inflation. And we can still grow the general fund expenditure budget by 15% and save $660,000 and not have to increase it. So that's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is that instead of growing general fund budget year over year by 17%, if we grow by 14.77%, then we will save $660,000. And there has to be a way to do that from this budget, whether it's wages, whether it's operations, whatever it is, there are ways to do that. And I say it's just hard decisions. It's not easy, but it is hard decisions. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to make hard decisions. We're not here to just go with it. And like Clark said, we can't just be the 50th thing in the past couple of years. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep on harping on this. And inflation is hitting the residents. We can't just pass on inflation that the city is feeling to the residents. Like that 18% number, that is residents. Like that is residents who have 18% less in their budget now versus like 2020. So they're already paying for inflation. And so for us to just say we're going to raise property taxes so the city doesn't have to deal with inflation, okay, well, residents are already dealing with inflation. They already have way less money. There are big economic systems that are at hand here. There are things that are way out of our control, like quantitative easing and the federal government's inability to control inflation and their policy of having a 2% inflation rate, which is basically stealing money from American citizens anyway. So we can talk about that, but that's not in our control. What is in our control is how much we spend. And as I said, I've seen over a bunch of things, and I'm going to stop talking because I get pretty passionate about this. So that's all I'm going to say.
Mayor, a couple of points. One, CPI doesn't tell the whole story because it doesn't have food or fuel in it. So the inflation rate's more than that. And Tim, I agree. I think there's an unintended cost or a hidden cost. If we don't stay competitive on our wages, we will lose people. And I don't think that's the place to cut, because if we lose people, then it's really hard to put a number to when we have to start training them. Our engineering took a hit for years and years. Developers didn't like us because we couldn't stay ahead of what we needed to do. Is there another way? I think Anna, you've done a great job, and David, in finding money to do an interim station. I mean, we're not going to bond for another $20 or $30 million for a station for several years, maybe 7 years or more, and that's the way to do it. That's the way to cut it. I don't think wages is a place, but are we willing to cut services? I'm willing to cut services, but I think we need to tell people we're cutting services. If that's where we decide we need to cut, but we need to be upfront and tell them, we need to put this down there. From a public safety standpoint, here's what we've got to do. Here's what you're going to have to do without. And then we've got those hard decisions, and we need to look at them and see. I just don't know what they are right now. I'll be honest, I don't know where to cut the money.
Just for the public record, I think we've said this multiple times, but the station costs 1.6 or something to staff, and we're asking for 660. Like, we're absorbing that portion already by cutting other things.
You know what? This is tough, and it's made to be tough. This is one of the biggest things, if not the biggest things we do, is we pass budgets. I've learned a long time ago, it's just $2. If you think of tax dollars as if it's let up with that word, just $2 or something almost minuscule, I've never felt that was a good practice, because $2 should be better spent somewhere else. Anna, I hope you don't get any kind of I'm just saying, it's us with not necessarily, again, we're not with you, we're a team. We will figure this out.
Absolutely, 100%.
But here's the question I have. We have to resolve this before we can pass the interim budget, right? Because that might, depending on where we're at, if that's off the table, then I guess we do. We budget amend. We make it work.
I guess I would need direction. You're saying fire station needs to be staffed. That's a non-negotiable.
I just want to get a consensus.
24-hour day staff, we've got to have Station 5-3.
Well, I guess did ask David this, and David confirmed it, but I guess that would be another lever we could pull, is instead of adding 11 firefighters this year, can we add 9? And I'm not saying we can. I'm not Chief Brems. I'm not the fire department. but it is a huge expense to add 11.5 FTEs in 1 year. And so could we add 9 or 10 or something like that? And I know you already answered that, David, and you're more than welcome to answer what you told me. It's a huge uptick, especially when the public safety has already had huge wage increases and adding political, and as I said, so that's all, anyway.
Do you mind, Councilmember, if I relay what I told you? So really, the number is 12. We need 12 firemen because we have 3 shifts, and on each shift, we need 4. We need 2 people to go out on the ambulance. We need 2 people to go out on the fire truck. We really can't roll out with less than 2 people on each of the apparatus there. So if we had 4 for each shift, times the 3 shifts, we need 12. And so what we have in the budget is 9, because we will take 1 fireman from each shift on Station 5-1 and move down to Station 5-3. That's why we can do 9, is we are actually reducing our capacity at another station in order to help us fully staff 5-3. That's why it's 9. But we are down to the minimum number of firemen for Station 5-3, so there's 4 there. Station 5-2 also has 4. They don't have any extra there. And then Station 5-1, we have 8. And so that gives us 2 ambulances that can go out and then 2 fire trucks that can go out. And we have so many times where we have concurrent calls, where one of the units is already headed out. We send somebody off to a call with a fire and an ambulance together, and then we get a call immediately afterwards. And there are cities who just can't handle concurrent calls. And it's really hard for our fire guys to not be able to handle the call volume. We are the busiest fire station. Station 5-1 is the busiest fire station in Utah County. They just field so many calls, and oftentimes they're concurrent. And so we're down to the bare bones on staffing at all of our stations. So
We're bare bones at all of our fire stations and staffing. David, if I could add to that, I was just going to mention that that's not the request. That wasn't the original budget request, right? I mean,
the original actually was 16.
16, because
And that-
people time off and vacation.
well, and I mean, the crews would prefer, it is, I don't want to speak for Chief Brent, but best practice is 3, a crew of 5 per 2 vehicle, right?
Yes.
And so that's the bare bones we're talking about. And so when we're saying it's hard to add anything different than frankly 9 new, because if you bring them on, that's kind of the minimum to be able to bring them on, because we're pulling from these others already. Really, 12 would be an ideal scenario at the minimum, but we're sort of cannibal. I don't want to say it that way, but we're doing everything we can to minimize the impact of the budget by borrowing from these others, knowing that 2 years from now, there's a high likelihood you're going to end up increasing that or adding some in the process. But the only thing that's worse is when you build another station and buy apparatus and staff it all in 1 year, and now you've got a $5.5 million swing. I mean, at any rate, Stace, Councilmember Carroll, I appreciate your comment about the increase in service, because I think that's really where I'm at. If we're not considering this, and for the record, I think I'm to the point where I would as well. Let's pass the certified tax rate, because we kind of have to do that so that we can define what it is we're going to change, if anything. But I look at it like we're talking about people not being hired or being let go. That's literally what we're talking about with our staff. I mean, if we're saying we're not hiring these individuals, we're not picking these individuals up, we're not adding an accountant for Anna who's already bleeding, frankly. I mean, I don't even want to ask how many hours you put in this first quarter. It's unfair what we've been living with, and I don't, at some point there is a break point, and that to me is the real and so for me, I'll have that conversation about not doing an increase, because I totally don't want to do that, but I'm tied to a service then. Okay, what are we getting rid of? And hopefully it doesn't impact somebody's job, because very likely if we cut a service in, I'm going to use the gymnastics, then that employee that was running the gymnastics program just lost their job. If we cut the, whatever, I don't know, parks crew, because we're no longer going to have right, those are the services that I think that I would be entertaining if we don't pass this increase. And I'm all for it. I'll spend nights and weekends and whatever we have to do to make that happen. I just can't get myself to, in fact, I had a conversation the first of the year with David about the very thing of key staff is critical. And we lose any key staff, we're in a world of hurt. And I for one, am not willing to, or qualified to step into any one of their shoes, so.
I've seen how this goes, and because I was a city employee for 8 or 10 years, and my dad lived it for 30 years. So I see how this goes, and this isn't a march. Tim can speak for himself, but I don't think that, Tim and I have not talked about this. Have we talked about this, Tim? This isn't a march to cut anyone's salary. This isn't a march to reduce wages for anyone. I'm simply saying, because I'm simple-minded, okay, maybe that's it. I haven't dug deep into the numbers like Tim has. That's not my game. I'm just saying that if our only solution, and we have cut things, I completely get it, but if our only solution is to go back and pull more from the residents, when we're pulling from them a lot of additional already this year, okay? I feel like this is a 2026 problem, but then I also feel like, well, we can't just keep going back and saying, well, it's got to be a tax increase. I don't want the employees, or I don't want anyone to think, okay, look, we're finding ways to cut salaries. We're not. I don't believe that. I'm not even going that way in the first thing. But I'm saying, okay, what are we going to do? We're having a rough year right now. We're in the middle of something right now that's pretty ugly from people outside of our city. So we've got that. We've got TSSD. We've got North Point. We've got secondary. We've got our culinary water rates, and we're going to do a tax increase. So that's quite a bit. So for 2026, that feels like a big load for me to jump in and say, you know, there is not a chance in the world I'm saying we need less firemen, or firemen need to suck it up for Station 5-3. There's not a chance in the world I'm saying that. We need that down there. I have 6 people who are very dear to me that live down in that area. 2 children and grandchildren down there with their spouses. I'm not saying discount that at all. I'm just saying, and it's going to require more of me, to dig into this and say, okay, where am I going to be able to find it? I'm not the accounting guy, but maybe I've got to get in and try and find it. I agree. We can pass this tonight, and we can go in and we can look into it. But the fact that our solution, and Anna, this in no way discounts what you're doing, but the fact that our solution from the 5 of us say, well, we trust the staff, what's gone on, we just got to go ahead and muscle up for $33 a year, and you know, in the grand scheme of things, $33 a year is not much, but think about it. And we just talked about these scenarios tonight. There's not a race, please employees, there's not a race to reduce your salary. There's not a race to wipe out what we need in terms of life-saving personnel down on the south side of our city. We're just simply trying to say, you know, it's like if we all got down in a room and we said, okay, fire's here, police is here, public safety, what we have to worry about most, then we have our clean water, then we have, you know, our sewer, we bring all of, then we have our parks, we have our library, we bring all these people together and we say, okay, here we are, folks, what's going to give? Because we can't have exactly what we want. All of these good people that filled the chambers last Tuesday, what's going to give, folks? because you got people that you guys want the gymnastics, but what if you can't have all the gymnastics you've got now? We seem to have lost the ability to say, okay, we got to reason together and try and get this thing figured out and say, okay, how can we make this? Okay, well, you know what, I'm going to do without this year. I don't know what that is. I've got to go and get deep into that. I don't want employees in the city to think, okay, there's no salaries, we're no more driving city vehicles. I'm just saying, these are all things that are there that we have to look at. We have to be able to, we have to be willing. And, I don't know, it's a tough situation. So I think we should vote, because we're not getting anywhere doing this. I think we should vote and go on, but my thing is, so is the solution every time we just go back and get more money from the taxpayers? I don't think it's got anything to do with the fact that I lost my job. I just think maybe I had perspective, but it's still, I swear to you, I think about every time that gentleman standing up in the back saying, you're taking my ice cream money, it's $9, but you're taking my ice cream money. And I think, I'm 4 or 5 years from that. So, I don't know.
You ready?
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question? So, make the assumption that we pass this moving forward, the tax rate, and we're now saying, okay, how we are going to dive deeper and reconsider or whatever, when does that timeline need to work?
Well, I think it's our responsibility personally to be able to go through this, and maybe sit down with Anna, because she's got so much time, to sit down with Anna and go through this and try and understand, or with David or whatever it might be.
I am available. I'm available to you with any questions you have. Emails, send them to me. I will answer your questions. I will entertain any recommendations that you have.
I feel like I feel like it's on me. To satisfy me, I got to talk to Ann.
I get that. I'm trying to figure out what we need from a timeline standpoint to hit 22nd, to hit January 1st.
If we pass this
we've
tonight,
amended
and then we
budgets.
pass our budget next week, and then we dig deep, we can always do a budget amendment, can we not, Anna?
Yes.
And we're not locked into doing this, this is just saying we're locked into the hearing and the truth in taxation.
Right.
You might say, okay, it's not.
Right, and it's giving.
Well, I've been saying that for 5 years since I started here, and Heidi Rodeback told me we need to peg the rate. I didn't even know what that meant back then. But the truth of taxation should happen every year, in my opinion, so that we can have this conversation and be honest about it and say, we're going up 50 cents, we're going up $1, we're going down 50 cents, whatever it is. But what I'm asking, I understand we need to do a budget amendment. What I'm asking is, when do we need to have that budget amendment ready to be done? I understand it's our job
By law,
as
we need
council.
to
The
adopt.
11th, by the 11th.
So by law, we need to adopt the budget by June 30. And
So-
then we can do
I'm
budget
kidding.
amendments any point after that. After June.
Right, but we would be working under the assumption of the current budget that's essentially in
with this
front of
tax
us,
rate that
which
includes
is
the
this
tax
tax rate,
increase.
which
Right.
starts,
July 1.
Except for the part for the fire station, because that part gets held.
Yes.
That will be held until,
That increase gets set aside.
are not able to spend that until our public hearing actually it'd be September 1st.
But it's included in the vote.
Yes.
But we don't have to do it, correct?
But if we don't do it, that's when we have to budget amend. Somehow we're having.
Yeah, we have to fix the money that's not going in.
Yes.
All
So
right.
on August
any other-
11th, on August 11th, when we have our truth and taxation hearing, if the council decides, hey, we're not going to go forward with that, or we're going to do something other than 9%, less than 9%, anywhere between 9 and the certified rate, then we would have to, and then we would pass a final budget, because what we're passing right now is an interim budget. Then after that truth and taxation hearing, we would pass a final budget. And then after that, we would have to budget amend if the revenues did not meet expenditures. We would have to go back to the budget and say, okay, where are those cuts coming from?
Fair enough. Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the resolution adopting the 2026 proposed tax rate for fiscal year 2026, 2027, and set date and time for the public hearing for truth in taxation on August 11th, 2026 at 7 PM.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Councilmember Hunter, second by Councilmember Holly. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll call for a roll call vote. Councilmember Hunter?
Aye.
Councilmember Holly?
Aye.
Councilmember John?
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll?
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Okay, item number 2 is review of the resolution adopting the property tax impact schedule.
Yeah, we're required by law, anytime we discuss the budget, to review this property impact schedule, which we've already presented to council a couple of times. It just reiterates what we've already discussed.
Okay.
There's no action to be
Yeah,
taken.
there's
on
nothing to
this.
be voted on.
Okay. Noted, it has been reviewed. Item number 3 is consideration and action on entering into a closed session, discuss the professional character or competence of an individual as described in Utah State Code 52-4-204 and 52-4-205. Do I have a motion to enter into a closed session?
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilmember John,
Second.
second by Councilmember Taylor. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Hunter.
Aye.
Councilmember Holly.
Aye.
Councilmember John.
Aye.
Councilmember Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, for the public, we're going to convene downstairs into this closed session. When that is over, we will open the door and we'll convene, we'll open the door back into a special session and we'll convene the special session from downstairs. Thank you.